At Thanksgiving, my brother's girlfriend humiliated my 5-year-old daughter, so I made sure she'd never want to come back. What happened at Christmas was pure karma. My brother brought his new girlfriend to Thanksgiving dinner. She spent the entire meal correcting my 5-year-old daughter's grammar and making her cry. So I made sure Christmas would be a lesson she'd never forget. Grab some popcorn because this one's satisfying. I'm Daniel, 34, male, and I work as a structural engineer for a mid-sized firm in Pennsylvania. Not the most exciting job, but it pays well and keeps me home most nights for my daughter, Mia. She's 5 years old, gap-toothed, and the absolute center of my universe. Her mom left when Mia was 2, said motherhood wasn't what she expected, and moved to California to find herself. Haven't heard from her since except for the occasional birthday card with a generic message and no return address. The divorce was messy. Not fighting over assets messy, but emotionally devastating in that quiet way that nobody talks about. One day I had a partner and we were figuring out parenthood together. And the next day I was standing in an empty apartment with a crying toddler and no idea how to do any of it alone. So it's been me and Mia against the world for the past 3 years. My parents help when they can, but they're both still working and busy with their own lives. Dad's a regional manager for a hardware chain. Mom works part-time at a library. I learned to braid hair through YouTube tutorials, watching the same video until I could do a decent French braid, mastered the art of packing school lunches that actually get eaten, can recite every episode of her favorite cartoons from memory. It's exhausting and lonely sometimes, but watching her laugh makes every struggle worth it. My job is stable and secure, which matters more than being exciting. I review structural plans for commercial buildings, make sure everything meets code, occasionally visit construction sites to verify the work matches the blueprints. Been with the same company for 9 years, worked my way up from junior engineer to senior project lead. The pay is good enough that I could buy a modest house in a decent school district. 3 bedrooms, small yard, quiet street where kids ride bikes and neighbors actually know each other's names. My younger brother Jake, 29 male, is basically my opposite. Works in tech sales, makes decent money, but has the attention span of a goldfish when it comes to relationships. In the past 5 years, he's had maybe 8 serious girlfriends, each one lasting anywhere from 2 months to a year. He falls hard and fast, convinced each new woman is the one until reality sets in and the relationship implodes. There was Jessica, the yoga instructor who dumped him when she realized he had no intention of becoming vegan. Then Amber, the real estate agent who lasted 3 months. Each breakup sent Jake into a spiral of dramatic texts and late-night calls asking where he went wrong. Our parents used to take his relationship seriously. But after the 4th or 5th dramatic breakup, they learned to just smile and nod. Mom stopped learning his girlfriends' names until they'd been around at least 6 months. Dad made jokes about keeping the guest room ready for whoever Jake's bringing this week. Growing up, Jake and I were close, different but close. I was the steady one. Good grades, played by the rules, went to state school on a partial scholarship. Jake was the charmer, barely passed classes, talked his way out of trouble, somehow landed on his feet every time. Our parents treated us fairly equally, though I think they worried more about Jake since he seemed to need more guidance. After I had Mia, Jake became an amazing uncle. He'd show up with toys, play dress-up, let her paint his nails purple. Mia loved him. He'd take her to the park, push her on the swings for hours, buy her ice cream, even though I'd specifically said no sugar before dinner. He was the fun uncle who let her stay up late watching movies and taught her ridiculous songs that got stuck in my head for days. She adored him, and honestly, seeing him with her made me believe he'd be a great dad someday if he ever settled down. So when he called in early November saying he was bringing someone special to Thanksgiving, I was genuinely happy for him. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe he'd finally found someone who saw past the surface charm to the decent guy underneath. The someone special was Melissa. They'd been dating for 4 months, his longest relationship in 2 years. Jake was absolutely smitten, talked about her constantly. Called me at least once a week just to tell me about something funny she said or something sweet she did. She was a 3rd-grade teacher at a private school in Philadelphia called Brookmont Academy. Had a master's degree in education from some prestigious university. Came from what Jake described as a really cultured family. The way he said it made me uneasy, like he was trying to prove something, like he'd finally landed someone impressive enough to make up for all the previous relationship failures. But I figured I was reading too much into it. Maybe I was just protective because previous girlfriends had been lukewarm about Mia, treating her more like an obligation than part of the package. If this Melissa was as great as Jake claimed, maybe she'd be different. Maybe she'd be the kind of person who actually enjoyed being around kids. Maybe Jake had finally grown up enough to choose someone decent. I was wrong on all counts. Thanksgiving morning started early at my parents' house. Mom had been cooking since dawn. 20 of turkey, homemade stuffing, green bean casserole, mashed potatoes, 3 different pies. The house smelled incredible, like butter and cinnamon, and all the comfort foods that make the holiday worthwhile. She'd been planning the menu for weeks, testing recipes, making shopping lists, doing everything in her power to make sure this Thanksgiving was perfect. I arrived around noon with Mia, who was bouncing with excitement. She'd made a construction paper turkey at school and couldn't wait to show Grandma. The turkey had a handprint for feathers, googly eyes, and a beak made from orange construction paper. It was lopsided and covered in too much glue, absolutely perfect in the way that only kindergarten art projects can be. She was wearing her favorite dress, navy blue with white polka dots, and had insisted I put her hair in pigtails with matching ribbons. We'd spent 20 minutes that morning getting the ribbons just right because apparently they had to be even or the whole day would be ruined. Dad was in the living room watching football. Mom was frantically checking on dishes and everything felt normal. Perfect even. My parents' house is modest but cozy. 3 bedrooms in a quiet suburb, the same place Jake and I grew up. Walking in always felt like stepping back in time with the same furniture we'd had since I was in middle school. Same family photos on the walls showing Jake and me at various awkward stages of childhood. Same creaky 3rd step on the stairs that had been announcing arrivals and departures for 30 years. Mom had set out appetizers in the living room, cheese and crackers, vegetables with dip, those little sausages wrapped in pastry that she only made for special occasions. Mia immediately grabbed a carrot stick and settled on the floor with her coloring books while the adults made small talk about work and weather and all the safe topics families discuss before the real gathering begins. Jake and Melissa arrived around 1. I heard his car pull up and watched through the window as they got out. Melissa was tall, maybe 5'10", with perfectly styled auburn hair that fell in those professional curls you see in magazines. She wore tailored black pants, a cream cashmere sweater, and heels that seemed wildly impractical for a family dinner. Everything about her screamed expensive and carefully curated. Jake looked nervous, more nervous than I'd seen him in years. He kept adjusting his collar and glancing at Melissa like he was waiting for her approval. That should have been my first warning sign. They came in together, Jake's hand on the small of her back. Mom immediately went into hostess mode, wiping her hands on her apron and offering hugs. Dad muted the football game and stood up to shake Melissa's hand. "So good to finally meet you," Mom said warmly. "Jake's told us so much about you. Can I get you something to drink? We have iced tea, lemonade, soda." "Just water, please," Melissa interrupted, her smile tight. "Tap is fine. I try to avoid sugar." The way she said it made it sound like drinking soda was a moral failing. Mom's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly and headed to the kitchen. I stepped forward to introduce myself. "Hey, I'm Daniel, Jake's brother." "Melissa," she said, extending her hand like we were in a business meeting instead of a family gathering. Her handshake was firm, almost aggressive, Jake's mentioned you. You're the engineer, right? And this must be... She looked down at Mia with an expression I couldn't quite read. This is Mia, I said, putting my hand on my daughter's shoulder. Mia, can you say hello? Hi, Mia said quietly, suddenly shy. She pressed against my leg. Well, Melissa said, her voice taking on that overly sweet tone people use when they're not comfortable around kids. Aren't you just precious? The word precious somehow sounded condescending coming from her mouth. Jake jumped in nervously. Mia's in kindergarten, right? Tell Melissa about your school. Before Mia could answer, Melissa was already talking. I teach 3rd grade at Brookmont Academy. It's a very rigorous program. We really focus on fundamentals, grammar, composition, critical thinking skills. So many children these days lack basic language skills because parents don't emphasize education early enough. She said this while looking directly at me, like I was one of those negligent parents she was criticizing. Mia's doing great in school, I said evenly. Her teacher says she's reading above grade level. Oh, that's wonderful, Melissa said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. Public school or private? Public. That single sound contained volumes of judgment. Jake cleared his throat. Should we go see if your mom needs help, babe? Babe. Jake had never called any girlfriend babe before. This was serious for him. We all moved into the kitchen and dining room area where Mom was setting the table. The dining room wasn't fancy, just a regular rectangular table that could seat 8 with mismatched chairs that had been collected over years. Mom used her good tablecloth, the white one with embroidered flowers that only came out for holidays. Melissa surveyed the scene with an expression somewhere between amusement and pity. This is lovely, she said in the same tone someone might use when visiting a museum dedicated to obsolete technology. Very traditional. Mom beamed, not catching the subtle insult. Thank you, dear. I know it's not fancy, but we like to keep things simple. Oh, I think simple is perfect, Melissa said. My family usually does Thanksgiving at my aunt's estate in the Hamptons. Catered affair, you know, lobster, crab legs, oysters, very elaborate, but I told Jake I wanted to experience a more authentic holiday this year. The way she said authentic made it sound like we were a living history exhibit. Dad, bless him, had already clocked that something was off. He gave me a look that said, "Is this woman for real?" I gave him a slight shrug in return. We all sat down to eat around 2 o'clock. Mom had outdone herself. The turkey was golden brown and massive, surrounded by all the traditional sides. She'd even made Jake's favorite cranberry sauce from scratch, the kind with orange zest that takes hours to prepare properly. As we started passing dishes, Melissa's commentary began in earnest. "Oh, you went with traditional turkey," she observed, watching Mom carve. "That's sweet. Most people don't realize that turkey is actually quite dry if you don't brine it properly. At Brookmont, we did a whole unit on Thanksgiving traditions, and the students learned that the Pilgrims probably didn't even eat turkey. It was more likely venison or fish." Mom's knife paused mid-slice. "Well, I've been making turkey for 30 years and nobody's complained yet." "Of course not," Melissa said quickly. "I'm sure it's delicious. I'm just saying what the historical record shows." Jake jumped in, trying to smooth things over. "Mom's turkey is the best. I've been looking forward to this all week." Melissa took a small portion of turkey when the platter reached her, examining it like it might be contaminated. She took one bite, chewed thoughtfully, then reached for her water glass. "It's a little dry," she announced to the table. "You probably didn't brine it, right? Brining really makes all the difference. My aunt's chef always brines for 48 hours with a special herb mixture. It's absolutely transformative." The room went silent except for the sound of forks on plates. Mom's face flushed slightly, but she just smiled tightly and said, "I'll have to try that next year." Dad was gripping his fork harder than necessary. I could see the muscle in his jaw working. My father is patient. Years of working in customer service taught him to keep his cool, but even he has limits. The parade of criticism continued through every dish. The stuffing was a bit bland. "Do you use fresh herbs?" The mashed potatoes were lumpy. "Have you considered using a ricer?" The green bean casserole was heavy. My family does a lighter version with fresh green beans and almonds. no canned soup. When Mom brought out the rolls, store-bought because she'd run out of time to make them from scratch, Melissa actually laughed. "Oh, you bought these? My family always makes everything from scratch. It's really not that hard, and the taste difference is incredible." Mom set down the basket of rolls without comment and returned to the kitchen. Through the doorway, I saw her standing at the counter with her back to us, shoulders tight. That's when I started getting angry. These little comments might seem minor individually, but they were adding up to a clear message. Nothing we did was good enough for Melissa's standards, and Mom, who had spent 2 days preparing this meal, was being made to feel inadequate in her own home. But I held my tongue. Jake was my brother, and maybe Melissa was just nervous. Maybe she was trying too hard to impress us, and it was coming out wrong. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Then she turned her attention to Mia. My daughter had been quiet through most of the meal, working her way through small portions of turkey and mashed potatoes. She was a picky eater. Most 5-year-olds are. But she was trying everything Mom had made. Mia looked up at Melissa with those big brown eyes and started talking the way kids do when they warm up to someone. "We're doing a play at school," she said excitedly. "For Christmas? Me and my friend Emma are going to be trees." Melissa's expression shifted into what I recognized as her teacher mode. Overly patient, slightly condescending. "Your friend and I," she corrected. "Not me and my friend. You should always put the other person first in a sentence and use the nominative case. Your friend and I are going to be trees." Mia's smile faded. She looked down at her plate, confused. I felt my chest tighten. "She's 5, I said calmly. "She's still learning, which is exactly why it's important to correct these things early," Melissa said as if explaining something obvious. "Bad grammar habits form young. If parents don't reinforce proper usage at home, children struggle later. It's actually one of the biggest problems I see in my classroom. Students who've never been taught to speak correctly." The word parents landed like an accusation. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "She's doing fine," I said, keeping my voice level. "Her teacher says she's one of the top students in her class." "I'm sure she is," Melissa said with that same patronizing smile. "For public school kindergarten, the standards are quite different at private institutions." Before I could respond, Mia started talking again, trying to regain Melissa's approval. "We made the trees already," she said. "I already done the leaves and everything." "You did," Melissa corrected immediately. "You already did the leaves, not done. Done is a past participle and requires a helping verb. You would say, I have done, or simply I did." Mia's bottom lip started to tremble. She looked at me with confusion and hurt in her eyes, not understanding why this woman kept interrupting her story to criticize how she talked. I put down my fork. "Melissa," I said, my voice firm now. "She's 5 years old. Could you maybe ease up on the grammar lessons? She's just trying to tell you about her school play." Melissa looked genuinely surprised, like I'd said something unreasonable. "I'm a teacher, Daniel. This is what I do. I'm helping her develop proper language skills. You should be thanking me." "She doesn't need a teacher right now," I said. "She needs family who will listen to her stories without making her feel stupid." Jake jumped in, defensive. "She's not making anyone feel stupid. She's trying to help. That's literally her job, helping kids learn." "Mia's not her student," I countered. "And this is Thanksgiving dinner, not a classroom." Melissa's eyes narrowed. "I was simply trying to support your daughter's education. But if you prefer to let her develop poor language habits that will hold her back academically, that's your choice as a parent." The implication was crystal clear. I was a bad parent who didn't care about my daughter's education. Dad finally spoke up, his voice low and controlled. "Melissa, I think what Daniel's trying to say is that maybe we can focus on enjoying the meal and save the teaching for another time." "I was just trying to help," Melissa said, her tone shifting to wounded innocence. She looked at Jake for support. Jake immediately sided with her. "Everyone's being really sensitive about this. She was just correcting some grammar. It's not a big deal." "It is when you make a little kid cry," I said, pointing at Mia, whose eyes were now watering. Melissa looked at Mia, then back at me, her expression hardening. If your daughter is crying because someone corrected her grammar, perhaps the issue is that she's overly coddled. Children need to learn resilience and accept criticism. That was it. That was the line. Get out, I said quietly. Excuse me? Melissa's eyebrows shot up. You heard me. You've spent this entire meal insulting my mother's cooking, criticizing our family, and making my daughter feel terrible about herself. I'm done being polite. Leave. The room went dead silent. Mom had come back from the kitchen and stood frozen in the doorway. Dad was watching carefully, ready to back me up if needed. Jake stood up abruptly. Are you serious right now? You're kicking her out? I'm asking her to leave, I said. Yes. She's been nothing but condescending since she walked in the door. Melissa stood up slowly, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. I cannot believe how rude this family is. I was simply trying to make conversation and offer educational support, and this is how I'm treated. You weren't making conversation, I said. You were showing off and putting everyone down to make yourself feel superior. There's a difference. She grabbed her designer purse from the back of her chair. I've never been so insulted in my life. Jake, are we leaving or are you staying with these people? Jake looked torn, glancing between Melissa and the rest of us. For a second I thought he might stay, then he grabbed his jacket. This is messed up, he said to me. She's my girlfriend, you can't just kick her out. I just did, I replied. Jake and Melissa left without another word. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the picture frames in the hallway. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom slowly sat down at the table, staring at her now cold dinner. Dad let out a long breath. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking, measuring out seconds that felt like hours. Well, he finally said, that was quite the Thanksgiving. Mia crawled into my lap, burying her face in my chest. Did I talk wrong, Daddy? She whispered, her voice so small it broke my heart. My heart broke. No, baby, you talked perfectly fine. That lady was just being mean. She's a teacher, though. Teachers know stuff. Teachers know a lot of things. I agreed, stroking her hair, feeling the anger rise up again. But they don't know everything. And even teachers can be wrong about how to treat people. Being smart doesn't mean being kind. And kind is way more important. Mom reached over and squeezed Mia's hand. Your daddy's right, sweetheart. You're absolutely perfect just the way you are. Don't you ever let anyone make you feel like you're not good enough. We tried to salvage the rest of the dinner, but the mood was ruined. Mom reheated everything, but the food tasted bland now, like all the joy had been sucked out of it. We ate mostly in silence. Dad tried to make conversation about the football game, but even he seemed deflated. The whole afternoon had this heavy feeling like we were mourning something. By 4 o'clock, I was loading Mia into the car to head home. She was quiet, subdued in a way that wasn't normal for her. Usually after family gatherings, she'd chatter the whole drive home about what Grandma said or what game she played with Uncle Jake. This time she just sat in her car seat, clutching her construction paper turkey and staring out the window. As I was buckling her in, Dad pulled me aside. You did the right thing, he said. That woman was out of line, way out of line. Jake's going to be furious with me. Let him be furious. He needs to learn that you can't bring someone into this family who treats people like that. Especially not Mia. I nodded, but I felt sick to my stomach. Jake and I rarely fought, and when we did, it never lasted long. But this felt different, this felt bigger. I drove home with Mia singing quietly in the back seat, trying to cheer herself up. When we got home, she asked if Uncle Jake was mad at her. No, sweetie. Uncle Jake's not mad at you at all. Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, but that's not your fault. She seemed satisfied with that answer and went to play with her toys. But I sat on the couch, staring at my phone, waiting for the inevitable angry text from Jake. It came at 8 p.m. Thanks for ruining Thanksgiving. Mom said you don't want Melissa at Christmas either. Real mature, bro. I typed back. I didn't ruin Thanksgiving. She did. And I haven't said anything about Christmas. Mom told me you talked to her about Melissa not coming. You're really going to exclude her like that? I called my mom. She answered on the second ring. Did Jake ask you about Christmas? I said. He did, she admitted. He wanted to know if Melissa would be welcome. I told him I'd have to talk to everyone first. I didn't want another scene like today. What did you tell him? Mom sighed. I said we'd figure it out. But honestly, Daniel, I don't want her here either. She made me feel terrible about the food I'd spent 2 days making, and what she said to Mia. That's unforgivable. Did you tell Jake that? Not in so many words. I didn't want to cause more problems. Mom, you need to be honest with him. He's defending her because he thinks we're all overreacting. I know, I'll talk to him. But talking didn't help. Over the next 3 weeks, Jake sent me a series of increasingly hostile messages. First, he tried guilt. Families supposed to support each other. You're choosing to be petty instead of giving her a chance. She's really hurt by all this. You embarrassed her. Then anger. You humiliated her in front of everyone. She's never been treated like that before. Do you know how hard it is to find someone who takes education seriously? Someone who actually cares about making kids better? Finally, an ultimatum. If Melissa's not welcome at Christmas, neither am I. I mean it this time. You need to decide what's more important, your pride or your family. I didn't respond to most of them. What was the point? He'd made his choice clear. Each message that came through just confirmed what I already knew. Jake was so desperate to make this relationship work that he couldn't see how toxic it was. Or maybe he could see it and just didn't care. Because being with someone cultured mattered more than how she treated his family. My ex-wife, Sarah. I should mention her, actually. She's a pediatric nurse who works night shifts at the hospital. She and I divorced when Mia was 3, but we co-parent well. She has Mia every other weekend and Wednesday nights. The divorce wasn't about fighting or cheating or any dramatic reason. We just realized we wanted different things from life. She wanted to focus on her career and travel, and I wanted to be a present parent. We're better as co-parents than we ever were as spouses. When I told her about Thanksgiving, she was furious on Mia's behalf. That woman corrected a 5-year-old's grammar at a family dinner, she said, incredulous. Who does that? What kind of person makes a kindergartner feel bad about how they talk? Apparently Jake's girlfriend. You should keep her away from Mia. People like that are toxic. They don't change. They just find new victims. Trust me, I see it all the time with the kids in the hospital. Parents who are more concerned with their children being perfect than with their children being happy. I agreed, but I also knew that the Christmas situation was going to get messy. If Jake refused to come without Melissa, it would create a rift in the family that might not heal easily. My parents would be heartbroken. Mia would be confused about why Uncle Jake wasn't there. And part of me still hoped that maybe Jake would see reason, that he'd choose his family over this woman who'd shown us exactly who she was. Then about a week before Christmas, my mom called with an idea. What if we invite her? Mom said. Are you kidding? Hear me out. What if we invite her, but on our terms, we control the situation? Make it so uncomfortable for her that she'll never want to come back. Mom, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. Or, she said, it's a recipe for justice. That woman made me feel terrible about my cooking. She made Mia cry. She needs to understand that she can't treat people like that. I was skeptical, but I was also intrigued. What did you have in mind? Leave it to me, she said mysteriously. Just make sure you bring Mia and maybe prepare some questions about grammar and teaching. Educational questions? Exactly. Mom, what are you planning? You'll see, trust me. I wasn't sure I did trust her. Mom's idea of subtle revenge was sometimes about as subtle as a brick through a window. But I agreed, mostly because I wanted to see what she had up her sleeve. Christmas Day arrived cold and gray, with a light dusting of snow making everything look like a postcard. Mia was excited. She had been talking about Santa for weeks and was thrilled to show off her new toys to Grandma and Grandpa. We arrived at my parents' house around noon. The place was decorated within an inch of its life. Lights on every surface, garlands wrapped around the staircase, a massive tree in the corner of the living room. Mom had gone all out. Jake and Melissa showed up about 20 minutes later. Melissa was wearing a red designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Heels high enough to require insurance, and a smile that suggested she thought she'd already won some invisible competition. Merry Christmas, Jake said stiffly, avoiding eye contact with me. Merry Christmas, I replied just as stiffly. Melissa surveyed the decorations with that same condescending amusement. How festive, she said, very maximalist. Great, we like Christmas, Mom said cheerfully, hanging up their coats. Can I get you something to drink? Water's fine. Do you have sparkling? Just tap, I'm afraid. That's fine. The way she said it suggested it was absolutely not fine. We all settled in the living room. Mia immediately started showing Jake her new dollhouse, chattering excitedly about all the tiny furniture. Jake seemed genuinely interested, which reminded me why I loved my brother despite our current issues. Melissa, however, kept checking her phone and glancing around like she was looking for an exit. After about 15 minutes of small talk, Mom clapped her hands together. All right, everyone, I have a special activity planned for today. Since Melissa's a teacher, I thought we could do something educational and fun. Melissa perked up immediately. Oh, I love educational activities. What did you have in mind? Mom pulled out a stack of colorful flashcards from a bag she'd hidden behind the couch. I made a little game called Christmas Grammar Challenge. Since you're so passionate about proper language use, I thought you'd enjoy helping us all improve our skills. Melissa's eyes lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. What a wonderful idea. I'd be happy to help. Great, Mom said, her smile a touch too bright. Here's how it works. I'll show everyone a card with a sentence on it. Some will be grammatically correct, some won't. Whoever identifies the error and explains how to fix it gets a point. But, she held up a finger, you also have to demonstrate how you would teach this correction to a kindergartner. In other words, tone matters just as much as accuracy. We'll all vote on whether your teaching style was appropriate. I started to understand Mom's plan. This was brilliant. Melissa, oblivious to the trap, nodded eagerly. That sounds perfect. Grammar education really is about both content and delivery. Exactly, Mom said. And since you're the professional, we'll hold you to the highest standard. You'll lose points if your tone is too harsh or condescending. After all, good teachers know how to correct without crushing spirits, right? Of course, Melissa agreed, still not catching on. We all sat down around the coffee table. Mom shuffled the cards and pulled out the first one. Okay, here's the first sentence. Me and Santa went to the North Pole. Melissa's hand shot up like she was in 4th grade. Oh, that's easy. It should be Santa and I. You always put the other person first, and me is objective case while I is nominative. You wouldn't say me went, you'd say I went, so it's Santa and I went. Grammatically correct, Mom said, but let's vote on delivery. How would everyone rate her tone if she were teaching this to a 5-year-old? Dad pretended to consider seriously. Bit harsh. Felt like I was being scolded. I give it a 6 out of 10. I agree, I added. Content was right, but the delivery was abrupt, maybe a 7. Mom made a show of writing down scores. So that's an average of 6.5, 1 point for accuracy minus 0.35 for tone. You're at 0.65 points, Melissa. Melissa's smile twitched. This seems like a very complicated scoring system. Education is complicated, Mom said lightly. Next card. I already done my homework. Mom read the next card. Melissa practically leapt forward. It should be I already did my homework or I've already done my homework. You can't use done without a helping verb. Technically correct, Mom said, but let's vote on tone. Dad. 5. Felt clipped. Me. 6. Mom. 4. Average of 5, Mom announced. 1 point for accuracy minus half a point for condescending tone. You're now at 1.15 points total. This is ridiculous, Melissa muttered. Is it? Mom asked innocently. You seem to think it's fine to correct others. Surely you don't mind being held to the same standard. Jake shifted uncomfortably. He was starting to realize this was not going the way Melissa expected. We continued through 10 more cards. Each time, Melissa got the grammar right. She really did know her stuff. But each time, her delivery became sharper, more impatient, more annoyed that she was being judged on tone. And each time, we rated